can preheat our oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've got this turkey neck here, and I'm going to set that aside. It's going to be an integral part. We have a couple of carrots, which we're just going to cut the ends off here. And we can cut them into kind of medium-sized chunks. I didn't really bother peeling them because these guys are just going to get, there's a little bit of a kind of a rotten end here I can just chop off and discard. We didn't really peel these guys because they're just going to get roasted with the turkey neck and make the base of the gravy. I'm going to take a whole head of garlic and we're actually just going to cut it straight down horizontally through all of the cloves, exposing them all. So it should look exactly like that. With the skin, just like that. And that's going right in this little bowl. Skin and all. An onion, which we can cut the bolster end off and the top end off, cut it in half, peel. And all of this is going to get cooked in with our broth to flavor the stock and turn it into turkey gravy. I'm not overly concerned about exactly how I cut it. Just don't want it to burn, so I don't want any tiny little pieces, because ultimately this is all going to get strained out. It's just for flavor. So you can cut these guys in half once and make some larger chunks. A couple of stalks of celery. Celery, actually, if you look inside, there's a little bit of dirt in here, which I think we should just rinse off. You can just see that those celeries have a little dirt, so just grab a little cold water and using our fingers, we could just rinse it off. There's nothing inedible about that, but we ain't making dirt gravy, people. We're making turkey gravy. So just give these guys a little slice to chunks. Maybe trim off any of the kind of ends that are a little bit wilted and not so great. So we can grab all of this stuff. We have a small baking tray. And what we want to do is just, we can do this in a couple stages because we don't have this giant bowl, but a little bit of olive oil in with this stuff. A pinch of salt just to kind of get it going and season it up. And we can throw this right on our baking tray. So onions, celery, carrots, which is the traditional mirepoix or kind of like French sauce base. A little bit of olive oil to start the roasting process. A little bit of salt. Right on this baking tray. And we're going to go right in the bottom of an oven. So the idea here is all of this together is going to roast, get some kind of color, and then we're going to make our turkey gravy with this. But we want to get it in the oven first so it has a chance to get some color. So we're going to just pop this bad boy right on top. Note the time. We're going to want that to bake for somewhere around 45 minutes or an hour. So we'll check that when we're ready to turn the oven down. We're going to take the veggies that have been roasting out of the oven. We're going to take them and we're going to scrape them into the pot that we're going to make our turkey gravy on. So take these guys and just scrape them. Take that turkey neck right in, and all these veggies can go right into our pot. And if there's any kind of roasted veggie stuff on the base of this pan here, we really want to try and scrape that all out, because that is going to be integral to the flavor of this turkey gravy. And in all the fat, all the liquid, are going to go right in there. we're going to add some fresh thyme, a couple of sprigs of fresh thyme right in here. And then a bay leaf. Right in here, at which point we're going to cover it with our chicken stock. So I'm going to cover this with our chicken stock. And notice that I'm using an unsalted chicken stock. We're going to reduce this fairly significantly, so I want to use a low sodium or unsalted chicken stock. Otherwise it can be quite salty after it's been reduced down, because the salt in the chicken stock is just going to get more and more and more concentrated. So we might wind up using 2 full things of chicken stock, but we're going to start with 1 here. Cook it, reduce it, add more, cook it, reduce it, add more. So got the chicken stock, and over a kind of a medium high flame, we're going to bring this up to a simmer and let it cook. Our turkey stock has come up to a boil, so we're just going to lower it to kind of like a medium low. We want it to be a rapid simmer. So simmer is really just kind of like barely bubbling along. We want it to be simmering a little bit more than that, so it's evaporating as it simmers. The only other thing that we could do right now is we're going to need to thicken our gravy later. So we've got some butter, and we can just mix together our butter and flour mixture, which we'll use, and then we can put that in the refrigerator, and that'll be in good shape. So the way to kind of do that is we could just grab a piece of saran wrap, and you could do this in a bowl, but I don't know if I'm being lazy or I just don't want to clean another dish and use another one. A little piece of kind of plastic wrap or saran wrap, and we can just take our butter, piece of soft now because it's been sitting out, room temperature butter. We can drop this right in the middle. And we want to use equal parts flour and butter. This is called beurre mani. So there are a lot of different types of ways to thicken things. You can use cornstarch, or you can use a roux. Beurre mani is one of my favorites, and I do use it at the restaurant a lot, where basically you're just going to take equal parts by weight of butter and flour, and we're just going to kind of mash them together. And you can see I'm just kind of using the plastic wrap here as the means to mash it together, just to kind of keep it a little bit clean. Again, you could do this with your hands, or at the restaurant we use a ton of beurre mani, and we do it obviously in like a big KitchenAid or Cuisinart or Hobart mixer. So if you wanted to make a big batch, and the greatest part about this stuff is that, you know, it lasts for almost ever, because all it is butter and flour in the refrigerator. And it's a great thing to have on hand, because you can grab a chunk, and what I do is, you'll see, we're just going to kind of like take a piece of it out, and it's going to melt. So the difficulty is when the flour is a great thickening agent. So flour thickens gravies really well, but the problem is if you just try and stir flour into gravy, it'll actually clump up. And it'll cook into little clumps, and it won't kind of like, you can't whisk it in very easily. It's quite difficult. But because it's completely mixed with the butter here, what'll happen is we're going to take this and put it in the fridge. And, you know, if you want to kind of get yourself like into the chef mentality, what I would do is I would kind of take it, and then I would form it into maybe like a little tube, kind of like this, and then maybe make it an even little tube, tie both ends, kind of like that. And when we got a tube, now we can cut, once this is refrigerated, we can cut little pieces off, and we can drop them into our hot stock, whatever we want to thicken. And as the butter melts, the flour will melt and incorporate, and it won't ever have big chunks of flour that stick up. So it's a great way to thicken sauce. The only downside is that it's got a really distinct raw flour flavor. So you can't just kind of go with the beurre mani and then serve it. You have to cook it for a good 5 or 10 minutes after the beurre mani goes in, just to cook out that raw flavor. So again, I'm just going to take this guy and throw it right in the fridge. Our turkey gravy is reduced down by about half now, and we're going to add a little bit more chicken stock to it. So we really want this to have a really rich, deep, concentrated flavor. So we can add the other half of chicken stock in and let that continue to cook. And what's happening here is that the chicken stock is reducing down, so the flavor of this is going to be reduced down, and then it's also going to be flavored by the thyme and the bay leaf, the carrots and onions and the celery and the garlic that have all been roasted together in the turkey neck, so that it has a lot of delicious flavor. So we keep on letting that go. So, to thicken our gravy, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this little bowl, and we're going to take this strainer, and we're going to strain our gravy into the bowl. So, just kind of pouring right out of our pot carefully. We're going to strain our gravy, and it's thick and rich and dark brown and beautiful, right into this little bowl here. And we're going to let that sit, and now we're going to wash this pot out because we're going to reuse the pot. So, not rocket science. We all know how to wash a pot. And we're going to use it for the same thing. So I'm not like sanitizing. I'm just trying to wash it and get all the chunks and everything out. It smells like the most delicious turkey gravy in the world in here. Kind of wash this guy out. Rinse it so there's no soapy flavor in our gravy, which would be a travesty. And now we're going to add this turkey gravy back into our pot where we're going to thicken it. So maybe we can grab the strainer and just pick it up and drop it on. And then using our wooden spoon, we want to press out any of the excess juice. We don't want to lose any of this love. Really give that a good squeeze. Wow. All the flavor of those vegetables coming out. And that is absolutely beautiful. You can see the meat on that turkey neck is starting to fall apart, and the garlic is just mashing up. Oh my gosh. So that goes right in our pot. This stuff here is going to be garbage because we have literally taken every bit of flavor out of there and turned it into gravy. So we can top that right in the garbage. Wash our strainer. We're going to use our wooden spoon more. I find strainers to be one of the hardest things to wash, but if you actually give them a little crack, it knocks all the little goodies out of there and it actually cleans them quite well. So that's my trick for cleaning and drying a strainer. The rest of this gravy, carefully, because we don't want to waste or lose any of it, goes right in our bowl, in our pot. And I can smell turkey gravy. Wow, it's amazing that. Back on the stove, medium-high flame. We want to bring this up to a boil. Once this comes up to a boil, we're going to thicken it. The way we're going to thicken this, we're going to whisk in the Burmese, and what that means is we're literally going to take knobs of that butter with the flour mixed in, and we're going to whisk it while the butter melts, incorporating the flour into it. The flour is going to absorb the moisture and thicken the gravy. And then we're going to bring it down to a simmer and let it cook so that it cooks for about 5 minutes just to cook out that raw flour flavor. So we grab our Burmese. And again, what we've got here is we've got this beautiful tube of now kind of cooled butter with the flour mixed in, and we can cut it into a few distinct chunks. This we can go back in the fridge and, you know, use as we need it, and these pieces we'll thicken our sauce with and see how much we need. You never know exactly how much you're going to need, so you just kind of have to whisk it and go. So the first part is, and maybe I know I'm going to need at least a couple pieces, so I can grab a couple of pieces and I can drop them right in and start whisking. I'm not going crazy, I just want to kind of make sure that nothing's sticking. So we're just giving it a little whisk, maybe medium-high, not like overly crazy boiling. And you'll start to see two things happen. One is that it's going to thicken, but two, as the flour starts to absorb the fat, it's going to emulsify together and turn it into this kind of like, instead of it being like liquid with fat on top, it's going to be thick and emulsified gravy. And I think for me, gravy should be quite thick. So I can see that even though I put a couple of pieces in here, it's still quite kind of liquidy. So I'm definitely going to go with at least one more piece. And you know, when you work with gelatin or pectin, it doesn't thicken until it cools down. This is gonna thicken right away, so we're gonna know when it's ready. And for me, nappe is the name of the game, and we're going to show you what that means. It's how you know when a liquid is properly thickened for gravy, and it's going to be a little test that we use our spoon to check. So still pretty loose, pretty liquidy, so I'm going to go with this kind of final chunk right here, right in, making sure we got no plastic. But I am starting to see that telltale sign of it thickening up. It is turning into gravy. It's not perfectly liquidy loose. And again, I'm also incorporating some butter here, so we're not forgetting that a little extra flavor is going a long way. So you can see with our tasting spoon here, that our gravy has started to thicken up a little bit. And it's really up to you. I mean, for me, I would actually go with a little bit more. I want our gravy to really cling to our turkey. I don't want it to just run all over the plate. So we're going to go with a little bit more of this Burmani stick here, because I think it's going to actually benefit the final dish. But I would add it in stages, because if you overly thicken it, which I promise you every single chef you've ever met has done, it's like you're sitting there, you just slaved over the sauce, and then it turns into glue, like mortar, brick mortar. You're like, oh man. And you can thin it out. If that happens, grab a little extra chicken stock, or if you don't have any chicken stock, a little bit of water, and you can always thin it back out. So it's not the end of the world, but it's much better to get it right the first time. So add it in stages. This looks about right. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to look for as soon as this is kind of all dissolved. What I'm looking for is, the way I know it's not going to run all over my plate, and again, sauces get thicker as they cool. So this is going to get a little bit thicker than it is right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take our spoon, I'm going to dip it in there, and then I'm going to run my finger across the back, and it's going to make a line. And you can see that there's a top line of liquid there. And if that line doesn't drip down, I can tell that my sauce is thick enough that it is nappe, which is a French word for thick enough to be delicious. So, you get that? That's the way we test. That is absolutely perfect. Lower the flame and simmer for 4 minutes to cook out the raw flour flavor. Even if I just place it right here, sitting on the flat part of my oven, that's going to be warm enough to just keep it hot enough to be Thanksgiving gravy. So that's done. I've got a really cute little gravy pot, which we're going to serve our gravy in. So give it a whisk, make sure it's not lumpy. Put some gravy right in our gravy pot. Be sure to like and subscribe, check us on Instagram, and download the Project Foodie app on the iOS App Store. I hope you've enjoyed this Project Foodie cook-along, and I hope you'll join us for more. If you want to make turkey gravy, you're going to need the following ingredients: fresh thyme, carrots, unsalted butter. I always use unsalted butter in recipes because I add salt separately. Flour, garlic, olive oil, fresh bay leaves. Dried bay leaves work perfectly well. If you can't find fresh bay leaves, feel free to substitute them. Chicken stock, and I prefer to find a natural, low sodium version. A yellow onion, turkey neck. We're going to use the giblets from inside the turkey. Kosher salt and celery. If you want to make turkey gravy, you're going to need the following tools: a small bowl, a knife and cutting board. We have a wooden spoon, a small baking tray. We've got a tasting spoon, a metal strainer, a whisk. We have a small pot. We have some cling wrap or a saran wrap or whatever you want to call it. A small receptacle for trash or garbage along the way, so I'm not having to constantly go back and forth from the garbage.